You've heard of AAA games, you may even have heard of quadruple A games, but have you ever heard of a super game? Well, a super game is supposed to be out by now. Now let me explain. For the last 5 years, Sega has been funneling developers' money and time into a production black hole so that they can compete with the biggest publishers in gaming. And as of this month, the damn thing is dead. And I'll tell you why this matters. We see how corporate short-termism leads to companies all fighting for the same territory instead of exploring new territory, and we've all felt the damage it's done to this industry. What actually matters, though, is when these companies realize this stuff has been insane and a huge waste and actually change their actions. The story won't make sense without knowing what's up with Sega, and it was not a great year for their games division. Even having a strong year for just pachinko could not hide how weak their gaming business had become. Sales were up, but profit collapsed, and their financial reports suggest that this is basically 5 years worth of bad bets all coming due at once. So, they're making changes. They're writing down their gambling losses on mobile games and also on literal online casinos. And in place of that, they're doubling down on an insane strategy of selling you their video games. And as a part of that, they're even giving up on loads of live services, and all of that starts with the death of the Super Game project. Today, it's our sponsor FlexiSpot helping keep this show on the road. Now, their brand month campaign is live, and for May 20th, the E7 Pro Standing Desk has discounts of up to 50% off. That's the one I'd point you to because I've used my E7 Pro for ages and it's my main desk at home. Long writing, recording, and thumbnail making days does not mean sitting in the same posture in the same place for hours. I can easily move between sitting and standing, the desk fits around the work, and you can just fine-tune things to be comfortable so easily. And it's properly solid. It's rated up to 180 kilos, so with monitor, mic arm, the odd light, cables, desk shelf, all the other creator clutter, it actually feels properly settled when I raise it and lower it. There's no wobble when I'm typing or anything like that. And it's so easy to cable manage around. I mean, I've always wanted my home setup to just be clean and comfortable, and the E7 Pro makes that much, much easier. But it's got a perfect companion too, and that's the C7 Morpher ergonomic chair. It's got this Dynafollow back support, which is honestly so cool. Looks kind of awesome too. It has inflatable lumbar support, forward tilt, adjustable headrest, backrest, all the stuff that you would need. So if you're sorting out your setup, now is a brilliant time to give FlexiSpot a look. You'll be able to get big discounts of up to 50% off, and the easy way to get them is to just click the link in the video description. And a huge thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring the video. Sega's Super Game initiative started back in 2021, and it was a bet designed to pay off 5 years into the future. It was meant to have lifetime sales of 100 billion yen, which is more than $600 million, and it would be driven by an online AAA global hit. It would, they said, be built in their banks of AAA IP, and it would be kickstarted by, quote, new FPS title at a European studio. Do you know what that FPS title was? You've probably forgotten, but all evidence points to it being Hyenas, Sega's most expensive game ever at the time of its cancellation, and it only lasted 2 years after that statement was made. That's the one they had creative assembly building. But even that wasn't enough to kill the Super Game initiative. It survived the collapse of Hyenas, and in November 2023, we got financials confirming that they were, quote, making steady headway on, quote, a game that builds a whole worldview involving the entire gaming ecosystem, including not only players, but also streamers who stream the game and their viewers. That's a very waffly statement. Who knows what it actually means? And I mean that quite seriously, because that's the most we ever heard about the damn thing. Now it's dead, but the cancellation of it was also equally mysterious. It was just 2 lines in their latest financial report. Decided to cancel Super Game, and no additional costs associated with the cancellation. There you go. GameFile actually got answers on why this thing was cancelled and what was actually cancelled. Basically, it was supposed to be an online AAA game, one that would power Sega's mid- and long-term growth, and that was built on the expertise they gained operating Phantasy Star Online 2. But Sega suggests that the project never left a, quote, long-term R&D phase for technical validation. Now obviously, R&D is going to be part of any project like this, but I think the bigger story is in Sega itself. So the Super Game was cancelled, quote, in light of intensifying market competition, the emergence of competing titles based on similar concepts, and our business conditions. We, I think, can assume Sega wanted a Fortnite and Twitch-style third space where players, streamers, and viewers all kind of inhabited the same, world or something. You can see how it sort of makes sense. But of course, Fortnite and Roblox are pretty big things to take on. And only confident companies can make big, bold gambles like that work. And Sega are not in that position anymore. They really aren't. Because sure, the Sonic movies are nice little money spinners for them, but every other long-term bet that they've placed has basically taken a beating. And that's why, in the slide announcing the Super Game's cancellation, they also said that they have, quote, lowered the priority of free-to-play. And that's another one of the reasons why I thought this needed to be a video, because as we see a lot of these big AAA publishers basically fall under more and more pressure, we might actually see some of this silly bullshit have to be cancelled, because so much of it is just a big speculative bet. Now, as for Sega's particular problems, basically the last year saw poor launch performance for Sonic Rumble Party, and across the wider free-to-play business, there was a 14% increase in revenue that was basically not the revenue growth that they actually wanted. It underperformed what they wanted. As such, free-to-play games are being downplayed, and more than 100 devs are being reassigned over to what they call full game development for mainstay IPs. So, if you've been tired of industry bullshit, well, we're kind of seeing devs be reallocated towards, seemingly, the types of games that people might actually want and might actually buy. So that's the situation in free-to-play, and as for the Super Game, well, its cancellation seems to have cost Sega nothing extra, and that's presumably because those staff have just moved on and it never really left the R&D stage. But there's one thing that will cost Sega, and that is Sega's decision to buy Angry Birds maker Rovio, which was probably a silly move. So they bought Rovio for $776 million in 2023. Yet another pandemic-era money pit. They sure are popping up in more and more videos. Sega even bought Rovio for their live service and mobile ambitions, but since 2023, Rovio's sales have been trending down. It's really been rough. They had 2025 performance that was, quote, soft. They were down by 32 million euro, or about $35 million, on the prior year. And back in February this year, Sega wrote off 200 million from the company's value, which is why they're taking a hit to their balance sheet this year. So yeah, the Rovio bet really didn't work. But let's think about it. Because in the gaming space, Rovio was supposed to help Sega build a global games-as-a-service network. They were supposed to be the experts in that. It obviously failed, and now they're being told to focus on their own restructuring, to sell Angry Birds movies and merch via licensing, and to, quote, secure stable earnings. Yeah, a lot of the stupid shenanigans are just failing. But does this actually mean any good games will be invested in now? Well, what they're saying anyway is basically that they want to go back to the basics. Here's the quote. The group aims to achieve growth by launching new full game titles of its flagship IPs while strengthening its sales capabilities through the enhancement of its sales structures and the renewal of promotional activities. Ah, what an exciting statement. Basically, they're going to make the shit they know you like and market their stuff more. Yeah, make video games, sell them to you. A bold initiative for a games company, but it may just work. And maybe, just maybe, they took a little look at Capcom and thought, how about we just make games and sell them to people? Because it seems that actually can work. Or at least, it might have just worked if Sega hadn't left their full game market in such a goddamn messy state. Here's what I mean by messy state. Back in November, a summary of Sega's investor Q&A highlighted that only 17% of sales that quarter were from new releases. That was really not too good. And by year-end, it was only expected to rise up to 20%. And Sega's response was really peculiar, right? They suggested that they had put out fewer games this year anyway, but the genre competition and launch pricing may have been their real issues. Now, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds might have gotten good reviews, but 1 million sales against Mario Kart World's nearly 15 million was well below Sega's expectations. Those expectations could have been absolutely insane, because Mario Kart is just kind of a, thing unto itself. But they were still willing to take responsibility for two things. those are that players didn't know about Sega's games, and that even if they did, they wouldn't really rush to buy them. Does seem accurate, that's certainly how I think about Sega games. But it is all speaking to a real problem. You see, marketing is a huge issue for Sega, yes, but also for the entire industry. Sega blamed their release strategy as well. They suggested that definitive edition releases might be causing players to hold off on buying full releases of games, which is a bit of a problem because that's core to Sega's strategy alongside remakes and remasters. For years, that model had kind of worked. You have the likes of RGG and Atlus becoming multi-franchise studios, putting up multiple games a year. There would be definitive editions, remakes, remasters, all of these things that basically relaunched old games at full prices alongside new games. If you pair that with the odd Sonic game every so often and European strategy titles to pad out the sort of long-term engagement and spending, you don't really have to need loads of free-to-play or mobile games to be sustainable. That had essentially been their plan, and while they would do that, they'd get their super games and their free-to-plays existing because they basically had a stable base. The thing is, it's not stable anymore. Ever since the Super Game initiative launched, Sega Europe have been absolutely goddamn gutted. Relic and Amplitude have been spun off, and as soon as Sega realized they'd stopped collecting profit checks from Creative Assembly, they gutted the studio and then had them restructure and rebuild themselves, all for some lovely efficiency. We'll actually get to how that seems to be going in a video soon, but what it's basically meant, for now, is even longer gaps between DLC and full game releases, which is maybe not great for the Total War fanbase. Now, at least the 2-point stuff is being consistent. Then there's Football Manager 26. It had a record launch, but long-term, I really see it bombing. The player sentiment was awful even at the launch. So Europe's been a shit show. But meanwhile in Japan, even the safe hands of RGG are facing criticisms over Yakuza Kiwami 3 as being a less than stellar remake. But of course, endless remakes and all that stuff is kind of the market that Sega's built for itself, and it's now the one that they're hoping to put even more games into. They're forecasting 4 games for the next financial year. There's the RGG-made Stranger Than Heaven that's been confirmed, and based on our best estimates, we'll probably see Persona 4 Revival. There's just infinite Persona 4s forever, I guess, and Total War Warhammer 40k. Those will probably be tied to their relevant franchises' big anniversaries. Of course, Sega wants to do more marketing, and that stuff makes sense for marketing. Now, those are Sega's mainstay IPs, so the ones that they're now banking on instead of free-to-play games or super games. But while those will be doing the work, there's a whole army of developers who are trying to bring back Sega's glory days. By which I mean Golden Axe, Crazy Taxi, Streets of Rage, Jet Set Radio, all those things. So basically, premium revivals have seemingly survived Sega's purges. They've survived the collapse of the Super Game project. And that's kind of funny because the Super Game project was supposed to be the thing that would benefit the most from those IPs, which honestly did make the Super Game seem even more insane as a concept. Now, those revivals are the games Sega made when they were confident, when they were basically saying, we're going to make a Super Game and our stock's going to go to the moon. And in the best case, it's that kind of game specificity that can really build a company, that can make it strong. I guess these are exactly the types of things you would want Sega to make, right? Premium titles designed to deliver a great experience, none of the bullshit, maybe bringing back Crazy Taxi in a cool new way. That's all well and good, but I'd wager that for most of you, it's probably the what are big publishers going to be doing in the future angle that matters a little bit more. At the very least in this story, we see a publisher now put all of their eggs into the basket of premium non-bullshit games. I know it's a bit of a lazy way to describe it, but I think it communicates the basic point. It seems they're putting all their eggs in that basket, and they're expecting that type of game to drive growth in the way that perhaps their live service titles could have in a different timeline that is notably not the timeline we currently live in. Now, as good as that sounds, it could go one of two ways. In the best case, the studios are let cook and make really damn good games, and they just get promoted the hell out of by Sega, and everyone's happy. There is another possibility, though, and that is that now that these games basically have to hold the whole company's financials up, at least within its gaming division, that pressure would lead to squeezes on the game, squeezes on the developers, the sorts of things that lead to a big-scale company's demands and desires getting in the way of the development process. We don't really know, but after the last 5 years of failures, I can't exactly say I trust Sega to get it right, But I'll tell you what, if they're able to pull off a Capcom and actually start delivering properly good stuff, that would be a win for everyone. And I say that because Capcom's out there making huge amounts of money, performing extremely well, and doing so, by and large, making the types of games that I think people want to see more of. The more that we see companies do that, and the more that we see big AAAs move away from live service and move away from silly bets like whatever the hell a super game is, then maybe that will lead to a more sustainable industry. Perhaps one that won't be as hyped or hypeable in its financial performance, but maybe one that actually can be realistic, dependable, and actually serve the people who play games and the people who work on them. That's the hope anyway, and I'll tell you one thing. If the Stop Killing Games movement gets what it wants, and it certainly is making a lot of progress, maybe some of these games would at least be a little bit easier to make good by those rules. And speaking of rules, oh, there are rules coming in California, and you can learn all about that and what's going on with Stop Killing Games in this video next.